I think his listenership on Sirius today is certainly less than say what Limbaugh got, even at the end of his life when his popularity had waned considerably. So anyway, that is the discussion about Howard Stern. Before we do move on, Luke, anything to say about him or his predicament?
No, it's bewildering how he keeps going because it seems like he's embarrassing himself. He's a little bit like a 50-year-old prize fighter. Wasn't there some 52-year-old prize fighter who just
Uh,
came back a couple of weeks ago when Donald Trump was doing the color announcing and he got knocked out in the first round? So
mhm.
for most fighters who keep fighting after age 40, it's usually a ludicrous spectacle. And like some part of Howard Stern must be embarrassed by what he's turning out.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And now, talking about abortion, this is an issue which had gone away for a while in the national dialogue, but it is back. I think it's worth noting that the GOP has been pursuing this for generations now, and it was something that was big on the agenda before Trump came along. When Trump came along, they moved to more economics and national security, specifically immigration, and of course withdrawing troops from certain engagements overseas or not getting into those engagements in the first place. And the GOP sort of followed a different path, even though Trump did promise to not further the pro-choice agenda as president, which I think he very clearly made good on that promise. And I say this as a pro-choice person myself who wishes he would have done something different, but I can't deny that he did not. He certainly did not let the anti-abortion folks who voted for him down. But now that he's no longer in office, certain elements of the GOP have brought this anti-abortion debate back front and center, even though it's something which is clearly a loser for Republicans in election season. And they brought it back to an extent with this new Texas law that is almost beyond what words can describe, because this law, it's creative. It doesn't outlaw abortion in and of itself, but it allows people to sue those who get abortions and those who in any way, shape, or form assist in people receiving abortions. And it means that not only the abortion practitioner can be sued, not only the abortion practitioner can be sued, but somebody who drove someone to an abortion clinic, theoretically the receptionist at the clinic, somebody who gave somebody money to get an abortion, and people can sue someone, any of these people from out of state. People who've never even been to Texas can file a lawsuit. And I mean, the whole thing, it really incorporates some of the worst elements of the political left, where you have this over litigiousness designed to use lawfare against people whose views are disliked, even though what they're doing is legal. And then also it builds a culture of what the Cubans would call a chivado, or what I will call here chivadoism. Chivados were snitches for the government who would go around spying on their neighbors and reporting anything that they did which was not kosher with the party line to the party itself. And then these neighbors who were reported on would get, they have some bad things happen to them. That same culture now certainly has been inspired by the Texas Republicans who've come out with this ridiculous law, because they've essentially deputized private citizens to do what the state wants and stop these abortions. And the people are stopping these abortions by filing these absurd lawsuits, which, if they lose the lawsuit, they cannot be made to pay the person they sue's legal fees. So, I mean, it's a totally bizarre situation. Even if you very much oppose abortion rights, I think one has to say that this law is absolutely bonkers. But, it is what it is. Luke, anything to say about this?
Right. So on the face of it, it seems bonkers, but you have to then look at what are the repercussions. I mean, perhaps this is a law that will stand up against Supreme Court scrutiny. It seems like there's every indication that this law will pass U.S. Supreme Court scrutiny, and it will be imitated by other states such as Florida. So after 4 decades of ineffectual activity by the Republicans to try to restrict abortion, for the first time, it appears that they have struck on a winning formula. And if the formula is unappetizing, if the formula is offensive, if the formula seems to be appealing to the worst in us, that's one thing. But what if it works? What if it rallies the Republican Party? What if it brings Protestants and Catholics and brings about a Republican coalition that's then able to do other things? So events like this abortion law are not just events on their face. There's usually a deeper meaning behind it. Now, there's nothing inherent in Christianity that makes it fervently opposed to abortion. So people like to think that there's like some essential characteristic of Judaism, some essential characteristic of Islam, some essential characteristic of Christianity, some essential characteristic of black people, some essential characteristic of Nordic people, some essential characteristic of Japanese people, but there aren't. There aren't any essential characteristics of any particular religion or people. What happens is certain people manifest differently in different circumstances. And so Christianity, Protestant Christianity, and Catholic Christianity suddenly became obsessed about abortion in the late 1970s. This was entirely brand new. And as late as 1984, abortion was not a partisan issue. So what happened was that the conservative people like Phyllis Schlafly and Paul Weyrich and other movement conservatives, Richard Viguerie, Jerry Falwell, they were looking for some way to expand their base beyond those simply opposed to the civil rights movement. And so abortion was a way of uniting everybody with traditional ties. So it unites people who don't like big government, who don't want Northeast liberals and pointy heads on the Supreme Court or federal politicians legislating what can be the law in one's own home state. Some people just don't like threats to the traditional way of life and anything that opens up access to more sex, because anything that opens up more access to more sex, it makes marriage more unstable. It increases temptation for men, and it weakens the hold of a woman on her husband, because when abortion is legal, the man has more opportunities to cheat, screw around, and get away with it. So all sorts of people were incentivized to get aboard the anti-abortion bandwagon. So I think you could make a strong argument, as the left does. So often I think the left has very sharp analyses. I think you can make a very strong argument, as the left does, that abortion is really a proxy for race. In the 1970s, you had Bob Jones University, which until about 15 years ago, it forbade interracial dating. And so you had these segregated, racially segregated private schools that were losing their tax-exempt status. And this was not an issue that could unite conservatives, right? You don't get to bring together Protestants, Catholics, traditionalists, conservatives, right-wingers around an issue of we need to restore tax-exempt status to racially segregated private schools, right? That's a loser. But attitudes towards abortion basically reflect attitudes towards race. So whites who score high on racial resentment and racial grievance, they're far more likely to support strict limits on abortion than whites who score low on those measures.